Less than 5 seconds had passed when Carly Spencer woke up, and she was overcome with guilt. She was lying on her left side and found herself practically face to face with her lover, who had appeared before her for the first time in 10 years of marriage. Damn. Aristotle Klesko is a handsome man, she thought, looking at his sleeping face. His curly dark brown hair framed a face that was perfect. He just opened his big brown eyes and looked at her puppy dog-like, and her guilt instantly disappeared. Guilt? What guilt? Carly's flight home from San Francisco to Wichita always seemed to take forever. She often joked that it was a flight from the bright lights to the dark times. The flight gave her plenty of time to think about her last trip, especially what she had done last night and this morning. Aristotle Klesko was the Assistant Vice President of Marketing at the home office of Sebastian Electronics, a national supplier of home heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, commonly referred to as HVAC. Carly had noticed that the 30-year-old man was strikingly handsome when he appeared at the company's last quarterly meeting in December. Carly recalled being as tongue-tied as she had been as a teenager on a first date when she first met the man at an evening social gathering. They talked for at least an hour that evening and had dinner together as part of a small group on 2 nights during the 5-day conference. After the conference, they kept in touch, mostly through text messages but sometimes with phone calls, and over time the messages seemed to become more flirtatious. They confessed to each other that they were looking forward to seeing each other at the March conference, and Aristotle told the woman that he had reserved a table for just the 2 of them for dinner on the last evening of the upcoming conference. Carly always returned to Wichita on Saturday afternoon after the conference ended because there were no late flights out of Wichita on Friday evening. Those dark times again. During the conference, they spent a significant amount of their free time together. Ari, as she called him, seemed to be as in love with her as she was with him. From Ari's perspective, Carly was more than intriguing. Although she said she was happily married to a great guy, the 35-year-old woman began flirting with him from the moment they met. He was also married with 2 young children, but when the attractive blonde with curves began flirting with him, at first without invitation, his wedding vows didn't seem as binding as they should have been. Friday night dinner at a quiet, upscale Greek restaurant was wonderful, Carly would have said if asked. The evening continued and both felt excited, and Carly, without hesitation, agreed to his request to go up to his room after dinner. Ari was from Phoenix, and although there were several flights from San Francisco to Phoenix that evening, Ari booked an extra night at the hotel, telling his wife he wanted to attend the final dinner on Friday night to spend more time with her. Since the company was paying for the extra night, Ari told Carly that she would have no problem staying another day. Carly was fully aware that her feelings for Ari went beyond her vows. This was new territory for her. She had never before considered cheating on the man she considered her soulmate. Walter Spencer and Carly Abraham got married 18 months after meeting at a party at a mutual friend's house. The mutual attraction was immediate. Both were good-looking, intelligent, and well-presented. Walter, whom his friends called Spence, was of Nordic descent, with typical physical features: blonde, blue-eyed, and tall. As mentioned earlier, Carly was also blonde and blue-eyed, but only 5 feet 2 inches tall, a full foot shorter than Spence. To almost everyone, Spence and Carly were the perfect couple. People often advised them to get a room because they seemed to be constantly touching each other and blowing kisses. 10 years later, they seemed just as in love as they had been 6 months earlier. The only fly in the ointment of their marriage was Carly's apparent inability to have children. The couple began trying to conceive after 3 years together, and when she didn't get pregnant after 2 years, they both sought medical attention. Carly was diagnosed with serious reproductive issues, and doctors told her that her chances of getting pregnant were virtually nil. After several weeks of seeking other opinions and considering adoption, they decided to remain childless. At least they wouldn't have to spend money on condoms or birth control pills, they noted. As Carly and Ari drove back to the hotel where Ari was staying, the butterflies in Carly's stomach wrestled with the conflicting thoughts racing through her head. Her attraction to the handsome young man was winning the battle against her common sense. Ari had reminded her several times during the week that what her husband didn't know wouldn't hurt him, and he would never find out. As soon as they crossed the threshold of Ari's room, he wrapped his arms around her and kissed her passionately, effectively winning the battle for her heart. At that moment, she eagerly anticipated Ari becoming the first man other than Walter to have sex with her in over 12 years. Having decided to let Ari have her way, Carly resolved to get the most pleasure she could out of the experience, and to do everything in her power to make sure the young man did everything he could. She would make sure Ari never forgot it, and she would never forget it either, she decided. Part of Carly's strategy to make sex more meaningful for Ari was to be more demonstrative and verbal than she usually was with her husband. This strategy seemed to work flawlessly, as Ari reacted wildly to her extra wriggling, putting on a performance that she would describe as the best sex of her life. When they woke up in the morning, they had sex again. After breakfast together in the hotel dining room, they took an Uber to the airport. At the airport, they kissed goodbye, and then each went their separate ways to the boarding gate. An hour and a half later, Carly was on her way back to Wichita to her unsuspecting husband. Including a stop along the way, Carly had 8 hours to think about her. Cheating with Ari Klesko. It couldn't exactly be called a romance. After all, it was just one night and the next morning. But it was definitely cheating. Yes, the two had consumed several alcoholic beverages, but it was hardly a mistake made out of carelessness while intoxicated. These two knew where they were going before the conference even started. The dinner they had booked was nothing more than a confirmation of their connection. At first glance, Carly could have said that the sex she had with Ari was the best of her life. However, in the light of day, she realized that while it was really good sex, it didn't even come close to what she had ever had with Walter. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that cheating on Ari had given her no more pleasure than being with her husband. Exposing yet another urban myth, she smiled sardonically to herself. For the first time in her life, Carly wondered if her husband would ever find out that she had been making love just a few hours ago. It was normal for them to have welcome home sex whenever Carly returned from a trip. The anxiety and guilt that began to build inside her twisted her stomach into a knot by the time she arrived at the airport. Walter noticed that his wife looked unwell when he met her at the airport terminal. "Are you okay, honey? You look a little green around the gills," he commented. "My stomach's a little upset," she admitted. "Maybe I should go straight to bed when we get home." Walter had no reason to think his wife's stomach problems were due to anything else. When you trust someone... On Sunday evening, Carly and Walter did meet, but as each of them later noted to themselves, something had definitely changed. Walter noticed that Carly seemed to be just going through the motions, and for her part, Carly's guilt began to eat away at her soul. Carrie broke the deadlock on Friday evening after they had spent another boring night together. She looked over at Walter and noticed that he was lying in bed just staring at the ceiling. "Last week, Walter. I slept with another man when I was in San Francisco." For several long seconds, a tense silence hung in the room. "What the hell are you talking about?" Walter raised his voice in the darkness. Carly jumped up. In 10 years of living together, Walter had only yelled at his wife a few times, and never before in the darkness of their bedroom. "It was a mistake. A stupid, selfish mistake. I'm sorry," Carly said quietly. "A mistake? As if you didn't know you were in bed with someone who wasn't me. Well, screw you. I can imagine how it could have happened." "No!" Walter shouted, jumping out of bed and pacing in the darkness. It was stupid. It was selfish. It definitely shouldn't have happened. It was a mistake," Carly said. So you're saying this was your first mistake? Or is this just one of many? What exactly are you trying to tell me, Carly? Walter asked cautiously. I'm telling you that this was the first time I ever cheated on you, and it will be the last. I'm so sorry, Walter, she said, starting to cry. Walter turned on the light in the room so he could see his wife's face clearly. Oh yeah, baby. It'll definitely be the last time you cheat on me, because I'm not giving you a second chance. Why, baby? Why did you do this to me? To us? Walter asked. Carly cringed at Walter's statement that there would be no second chance to cheat. Wait a minute, Walt. We hardly ever fight. We've had a good life together. One mistake and you're ready to just throw us away? She argued. I'm just following your example, baby. We had a good relationship, so why did you decide to sleep with another man? I think you're the one who left us, Walter growled. Carly winced at the truth of Walter's statement. I'm so sorry, Walter. This shouldn't have happened. The only thing I can tell you is what I was thinking. I lost my head and got carried away. I really love you, and I know this shouldn't have happened. All I can do is apologize. Unfortunately, I can't take back what I said. I can promise that if you give me another chance, I'll never make the same mistake again. Carrie saw the pain in Walter's eyes. She saw that he was holding back tears. Will I ever be able to trust you again? He whispered. I promise I won't make you regret this. Ever, she whispered back. Walter stopped pacing and stared at his wife. He knew she didn't have to confess. She could have just kept quiet and gone on with her life as if nothing had happened. The question was whether he could live with the pain. I'm already starting to regret that you left, he said clearly. Over the next few days, they talked to each other. Most of Carly's conversation focused on her desire to stay married to Walter. Most of Walter's thoughts focused on whether he could trust Carly in the future. Trust is hard to earn, and when it's lost, it seems impossible to regain, Walter told his wife, who could only nod silently in agreement. A week passed before Walter decided he would stay with his wife. He told her that it was her confession that had prompted him to stay with her. He said his love for her was unconditional, but he still believed the couple should seek counseling, and he expected her to stay away from her lover in future meetings. I'm not entirely comfortable with you going to conferences in the future, he told her. Just remember, there won't be a third chance. At Walter's insistence, Carly told him everything her still unnamed lover had done to her last week. At first, she resisted because she knew the details would hurt her husband, but he insisted loudly, saying he needed to know so that there would be nothing left unsaid between them, except her lover's name. She insisted that she would not tell Walter his name so that Walter would not harm him and end up in jail for assault or, God forbid, murder. Walter did see the logic in this argument and agreed with it for a moment. After Carly's confession, they didn't have an intimate relationship, but things gradually returned to normal when a few weeks later, Carly began experiencing bouts of nausea in the morning. Her personal assistant, Jennifer, noticed how bad she looked right after she threw up in the bathroom for the third time that week. If I didn't know about your problems, I'd say you're pregnant, Jennifer commented. I know the chances are ridiculously high, but I'd advise you to buy a home pregnancy test. Why don't you do it today when we go out for lunch? Not giving her friend's words much thought, Carly stopped by the pharmacy when the two of them went out for lunch. She waited for Sebastian to return before going to the restroom to take the test. Not believing the results of the first two tests, Carly took a third before emerging from the bathroom with a stunned but happy expression on her face. I'm pregnant! This is the closest thing to a miracle I can imagine, but I'm pregnant! She giggled as she approached Jennifer's desk and showed her the positive test. Jennifer, a mother of two, reacted positively but with restraint. After all, both women were in a business office. Congratulations! I bet you can't wait to tell Walter the good news, Jennifer said enthusiastically. Oh yes, I bet he'll be just as thrilled as I am. We tried for so long, but then we just stopped when it seemed like it was never going to happen, The doctors told us that, at best, we had little chance, Carly said. Carrie hummed to herself as she flitted around the kitchen preparing dinner when Walter walked in the door. He immediately sensed that something very good had happened in Carrie's world, and he wondered if it would turn out well for both of them. "Well," he asked, "are you going to share the news with me, or are you waiting for me to guess while you dance around?" Carly's smile was as radiant as it had been on their wedding day, Walter thought. She walked over to the table, picked up the bag, and handed it to her embarrassed husband. "I don't want to ruin your mood, but what am I looking at, baby? Is that why you're smiling so broadly?" he asked. "These are pregnancy tests, 3 to be exact, and they all say I'm pregnant." "Surprise!" Carrie threw herself into Walter's arms, making incoherent sounds of happiness and covering his face with kisses. "It's a damn miracle, Walt! It's a damn miracle! We have a 1 in a million chance! I'm pregnant!" Walter pressed his lips to his wife's, picked her up, and spun her around, rejoicing with her. "You're going to see a doctor, right?" he asked cheerfully. "They found some time for me the day after tomorrow," she replied. "But these tests usually come back positive. I'm going to be a mom and you're going to be a dad. How about that?" Walter sat down on a chair, looked at the pregnancy tests again, and began to sob. "I never thought this would happen. Never. Never." Dinner was late that evening as they spent the next 2 hours celebrating Carly's pregnancy in their bedroom. It was the first time they had made love since the night Carly confessed her infidelity. It seemed like the last thing on either of their minds that evening. However, by the next evening, Walter had had a whole day to think things over, and real life had replaced the emotional reaction of the previous day. In his reflections, Walter came to the conclusion that Carly's date had happened at a time that could make him a suitable candidate for the role of the child's father. Forgiving Carly for cheating was one thing, but Walter would never raise another man's child. The day after their celebration, there was a clash between them that he knew could turn out to be anything but festive. Dinner was fun, with Carly chatting non-stop about everything related to the baby. She was in such a high mood that she didn't notice Walter was mostly silent during the meal, muttering something from time to time and responding in monosyllables when asked. He waited until they were alone in the living room before broaching the subject that was weighing heavily on his mind. Carly, have you thought about the fact that a few weeks ago you slept with another man? And the baby might not be mine, but his?" Walter asked cautiously. It was immediately clear that Carly hadn't considered such a scenario, judging by the shocked expression on her face. She tried to speak several times, but the words wouldn't come out until, "Oh my God, oh my God. You can't really be worried about this, can you? This baby is a miracle, Walter." Walter lowered his head, embarrassed that he was actually worried about it. He raised his head, realizing that he had every reason to be concerned. "When I asked you what happened, you told me it was a Greek man with olive skin, dark hair, and brown eyes. You and I are both fair-skinned, blue-eyed blondes. If he's the father, there's a good chance the child won't look anything like me, and that's the problem. While I would never want to raise another man's illegitimate child, it would be especially humiliating to do so when everyone knows about it." Carly seemed shocked and wasn't thinking as quickly as she should have been. "So, what are you saying, Walter? I'm sorry for being stupid, but you're going to have to spell this out for me." "Oh, for God's sake, Carly!" Walter shouted. "If this child isn't mine, I can only see 3 options, none of which you're going to like. First, you have an abortion. Second, you have the baby and give it up for adoption. Third, you keep the baby and we get a divorce. I'm not raising someone else's child, especially if it looks like Zorba the Greek." Wait. If this child isn't yours, do you want me to get rid of it, or will you divorce me? This is a miracle child, Walt. I've always wanted children, and now I'm going to have one. I will never give birth to this child and leave it to someone else, even if it means we have to divorce. I can find another husband. I'll probably never be able to have children again. One miracle in my life is probably all I'm allowed, said Carly, her big eyes filling with tears. Walter couldn't believe what he had just heard. He literally jumped up, grabbed his car keys, and ran out of the house. When he returned home an hour later, Carly was already in bed. Walter set the alarm on his phone and slept on the couch, which became a regular occurrence over the next few weeks. At Walter's insistence, Carly scheduled a DNA test for the fetus at 10 weeks. Carly continued to insist that the father of the child was not important to her, and that it shouldn't be important to him either if he truly loved her. That's easy for you to say. You're not the one who's going to be humiliated for the next 20 years, he remarked. To Walter's horror, the DNA test conducted a few weeks later revealed that the child Carly was carrying was not her husband's. The results were sent directly to Walter's office, and the first thing he did when he came to his senses was to make an appointment with a family lawyer recommended by a divorced friend. Carly found out about the test results the moment Walter walked into their house and threw the envelope at her while she was cooking dinner in the kitchen. She didn't get a hello, a nod, or even a fuck you when Walter went upstairs to change into his work clothes. Coming downstairs, he headed straight for the refrigerator, grabbed a bottle of beer, opened it, and plopped down in his favorite chair in the living room. The baby might not look like him, Walter. It might look like me and be a blue-eyed blonde, which would suit you just fine. I guess we won't know until he or she is born, she said, trying unsuccessfully to sound cheerful. Maybe. Stop it, Carly, Walter growled. If you really cared about my feelings, you wouldn't have had this child. It's as simple as that. This isn't our child, Carly. It's your child, and some unnamed man's. I have no connection to your miracle baby, but that doesn't matter to you. It's all about what you want. At least, that's what you think. I have a meeting with a lawyer the day after tomorrow. I'm tired of worrying about what you want. I don't want a divorce, Walt. I love you, and you love me. I know that, Carly whimpered. I do love you, Carly, but right now I'm not sure I like you very much. How many more times can you disrespect me? Walter asked. I'm going to spend some time in a hotel, away from you, so I don't strangle you to death. I've never hurt a woman before, pregnant or not. But right now you're an inch away from being the first. But we can't talk if you're not here. We need to talk, she said. No, I don't need to talk to you right now. I really, really need to think. And don't call me every 5 minutes because I won't answer. Carly called Walter several times a day, every time he wasn't home. She always left him love messages and begged him to come home to her. On the 5th day after his departure, Walter was sitting at lunch when he received a call from his mother-in-law, a woman he found repulsive and did not consider one of his admirers. Walter assumed that Vera Abraham was calling to scold him for thinking about divorce, even though it was her daughter who had cheated on him. Vera was indeed calling on behalf of her daughter, but not to lecture Walter. She called to tell him that Carly had fainted at home while getting ready for work and was at the local hospital. He told Vera he would be at the hospital in 20 minutes. When Walter arrived at the hospital, Carly was hooked up to several machines, but she looked healthy. Her mother was sitting on a chair next to the bed. Walter walked over to the nearest nurse's station, showed her his ID, and asked about his wife's health problems. This morning, your wife lost consciousness due to what the doctor diagnosed as severe stress. Her blood pressure skyrocketed to a critical level. The doctor gave her medication to help lower her stress levels. Judging by what she told us about your current problems, your presence here should help her, said the nurse, putting away the patient's chart. Carly's face broke into a wide smile when Walter entered the room. You came. I wasn't sure you would agree, she said. I love you, baby, even though I'm not very happy with you right now. Of course I couldn't not come, Walter said, nodding to his mother-in-law. Walter stayed with his wife for the rest of the day. She spent most of the day chatting aimlessly and incessantly with him and her mother. She only occasionally mentioned the couple's current problems, always telling Walter that she needed him to come home. Walter couldn't deny his love for his wife. He decided that for now, he would return home. Carly burst into tears when he told her. The next day, Walter told Carly that he would stop the divorce proceedings and raise her child as his own if she agreed to certain conditions. Walter would be listed as the father on the birth certificate. Carly would never contact her father again, and her apparent indiscretion would never be discussed. She would have to tell anyone who wanted to discuss the child's parentage that she had made a mistake. Her husband had forgiven her, and the two of them were now the parents of the child. End of story. "My God, Walter, will you do this for me? For us?" she asked. "Yes, baby. I love you. I never get tired of telling you that." "I mean it," Walter said. Carly burst into tears and hugged her husband tightly. Carly had already told her parents about the pregnancy and the affair while she was in the hospital. Walter decided that they needed to talk to their parents face to face, so they planned to take a 2-hour drive the following Friday evening and spend the weekend there. "I'm uncomfortable doing this with you," Carly said. "Can't you go alone?" "You're going to get your share of the blame for this, baby. You created this situation. I'm not going to be the only one who has to deal with this shit. Do you understand me?" Walter asked. Carly nodded silently and swallowed. "Your mom is definitely going to kick my ass. I guess I deserve it." Walter raised his eyebrows, looking at his wife. "Imagine the conversation I'm going to have with my father." "Damn it," Walter said. Walter and Carly arrived at his parents' house around 8 p.m. After the usual small talk and settling in, Walter told his parents that he and Carly needed to discuss something important. The conversation that followed shocked and saddened Walter's parents. "How could you, Carly? How could you?" Francine Spencer asked, glaring fiercely at her son's wife. Carly sat motionless in her chair, staring at the floor, while her mother-in-law literally breathed fire. Jeff Spencer patted his wife's hand several times to get her attention. When she finally looked at him, he shook his head slightly. She nodded back at him. Jeff Spencer rose from his chair and motioned for his son to follow him into the kitchen. He walked over to the bar and took out a bottle of 15-year-old single-malt Scotch whiskey called Glenlivet. He poured the drink into 2 glasses and added a teaspoon of water to each before handing one to his son. Walter knew his father was about to tell him something he considered very important. Walter knew his father considered single-malt Scotch to be the pinnacle of distillation and only brought it out for special occasions and important conversations, such as the one that was about to take place. "I understand that you love her, but you have to be 100% committed to the child, or it won't work," Walter's father began. "You can't just talk about the child. You have to love him or her unconditionally, just as if he or she were your own flesh and blood, no matter what shit comes your way. If you can't love this child completely, unconditionally, then don't waste other people's time and most of all, your own. If you're going to do this, do it right, son. You've got the shoulders for it. Do it right." Walter and his father always got along well. Walter was the second of Jeff and Francine's 3 children, their only son, and there had always been a special bond between them. Walter took comfort in the fact that his father had always had his back, and he promised his father that he would always have his son's back. "I'll handle it, Dad. I promise," Walter promised. They clinked glasses and then sipped their whiskey. When they returned to the quiet living room, Jeff nodded to his wife, and she nodded back. Walter caught the nod and knew that something had been decided. "Would you like a cup of tea now, Carly?" Francine's voice sounded warm again. Carly looked up at her hopefully. She noticed that everyone else in the room was looking at her with smiles on their faces. 7 months later, before Carly was brought in, her gynecologist warned everyone in the delivery room that her baby was the result of marital infidelity and might not look anything like her husband, which ruled out any awkward moments during the birth. This was done out of courtesy to Walter and proved to be the right decision when a boy with olive skin, dark eyes, and curly, dark brown hair was born. Walter, who had attended all of Carly's prenatal classes, watched intently as his son came into the world. Carly was too busy to notice the fleeting disappointment on her husband's face when he first saw the darker skin tone, but he quickly hid his initial disappointment with a broad smile. "He's beautiful, Carly. Thank you," Walter said. True to his father, Walter tried his best to be an excellent father to his son. He coached his son's Little League team, attended his youth football games, assembled numerous Lego sets, and even learned Spanish to help the boy learn the language in school. Only a few times in all the years his son was growing up did someone have the audacity and bad taste to ask questions about the boy's origins within earshot of his father. The first man had a bloody mouth and a knocked-out tooth, while the second, a man 4 inches taller and 40 pounds heavier than Walter, limped constantly after Walter damaged his anterior cruciate ligament in a fight started by the larger man. Bobby McNeil was a man as strong as a fire hydrant, standing 190 centimeters tall and weighing what looked like an extra 15 kilograms. Few people realized that he was a black belt in 3 disciplines and had grown up in a rough neighborhood. He taught what he called combat sports, with a twist, a combination of martial arts and street fighting, which certainly did not conform to the rules of the Marquess of Queensberry. When Walter decided to stay with Carly and raise another man's child, he knew that sooner or later things could get complicated. A friend gave him Bobby McNeil's number, and Walter spent 3 years training at his gym. After Walter heard a couple of loudmouths who questioned his son's parentage and a couple more who insulted his wife for being a whore, rumors spread that Walter Spencer might be a good guy, but he was quick to fly off the handle when it came to anyone messing with his wife or son. Walter wasn't stupid enough to think it wasn't happening behind his back, but after a while, no one had the guts to say it to his face or within earshot. For her part, Carly mostly stuck to the agreement she had made with Walter when he agreed to call off the divorce. Not only did she never cheat on Walter again, but she never once gave her husband the slightest hint that she was the best wife in the world. Blake Spencer was a smart kid, and by the age of 8, he realized that he was nothing like his parents. Although he didn't dwell on it, he wondered when they would tell him that he was adopted. Over the past couple of years, he had overheard several whispered conversations between his parents and his friends. When it didn't happen by the time he was 15, Blake realized he would have to bring it up himself. It wasn't something he was looking forward to. He decided to do it one evening at the dinner table. "Guys, were you ever going to tell me that I'm adopted?" Blake asked calmly. "You know, I'm not stupid or blind, and I can see that I don't look like either of you. I'm old enough to handle this, guys. I've heard some whispering over the years. I love you both madly, but don't you think I deserve the right to know?" Both parents looked shocked. Carly immediately blushed deeply. Walter grimaced, then took a deep breath. He knew this day would come. Carefully choosing his words and speaking in a calm tone, Walter told his son the whole story, including how he had considered divorcing his wife because of her infidelity and subsequent pregnancy. Walter watched the emotions play across his son's face as he listened. He also noticed that his wife had her eyes fixed on her dinner plate, which made it clear to him that she had no intention of getting any help with this. Walter didn't hide anything from his son. Obviously, the story didn't show Carly in a good light, but Walter wasn't going to lie to his son to make his wife look better. "So, you're not an adopted child," Walter concluded. "You are your mother's son by blood, and mine by love." Blake shifted his gaze from one parent to the other, his face impenetrable to his mother when she looked up, but not to his father, who could read the anger and despair in his son's eyes, especially when he looked at his mother. "She made a mistake, son. She confessed it herself. and I accepted her apology. The fact that she got pregnant was nothing short of a miracle. It wasn't him. It wasn't another man. Since then, she has shown me every day that she is completely devoted to me, to us. As for your real father, he's nothing more than a donor, Blake. I've been your father since the day you were born. I sat with you when you had the mumps. I taught you how to multiply, how to hit a baseball, how to shoot a basketball. That's what fathers do. Although it was a mistake and a miracle that you ended up here, but in my opinion, that's all. However, if you decide you want to know more about him, I won't stop you. But that's the only thing you'll have to do without me. I don't know who he is. I never asked. I don't want to know. Your mother will have to help you with that. Blake's breathing became more ragged. How could you, Mom? He asked hesitantly. Tears rolled down Carly's cheeks. There was no answer. Blake got up from the table, picked up his plate, and carried it to the sink. No, Dad. I don't need to know anything about my father. I'm fine, he said, turning and walking to his room. I'll handle it myself, kid, Walter said quietly to his wife as he followed his son up the stairs. Walter knocked on Blake's door and entered when Blake invited him in. They spent about 30 minutes talking quietly. The gist of what Walter told Blake was that his mother loved him very much, despite the terrible mistake she had made almost 16 years ago. But she cheated on you and had a child with another man. How could you accept that? Blake asked. She confessed to me when she didn't have to. She showed sincere remorse. You can't turn love off like you turn off a light. I decided that I still loved her. And if I loved her, I could love her child. If that child could be mine. And mine alone. That was the deal, Blake. I wouldn't share you with another father, unless you decided at some point that you wanted to meet him. I think that moment has come. If you want to know anything about him, that's your right, son. Your mother and I will make sure that happens. I have the best dad in the world. I don't need to know about my biological father, Blake said. They hugged tightly in the middle of the room. Now, I think you need to go downstairs and apologize to your mom, Walter said quietly. Apologize? Blake said. Why should I? He looked at Walter's face. The argument was over. Okay, Dad, he said, almost in a whisper. 3 years later, an incredibly proud Walter and Carly heard their son, their own son, give his valedictorian speech at his high school graduation. Blake had received a full academic scholarship to Stanford University and planned to major in genetics. You have a wonderful child, Walter. You and Carly should be really proud of him, said Dan Wilson, the father of one of Blake's good friends, approaching Walter and Carly immediately after the ceremony. Thank you, Dan. We think he's a very nice young man, too, Walter said, a tear of pride rolling from his right eye. By the way, congratulations to your son on his acceptance into the Air Force. Walter assumed his wife was acting strangely because of the stress of their son's wedding a few days later. As the groom's mother, Carly had very few responsibilities for the upcoming wedding, so her husband decided she was just worried about what place she would have in her son's life after he tied the knot. Walter knew that there was a special bond between mothers and sons that was different from the one he shared with his son. Blake met his fiancée, Rachel Bowman, at Stanford when they were younger. The couple got engaged a year after graduating from university. Both Walter and Carly were crazy about their future daughter-in-law, a tall, red-haired girl. Rachel never asked, but Blake eventually told her about his background so that there would be no serious disagreements between them after the wedding. Rachel was quite surprised by Blake's story because, in her words, Walter and Carly seemed so in love, so harmonious. My father forgave her and raised me as his own child. As his own son. He was a great role model for me. I never even asked my mother who my father was. I don't care, he said. The wedding, which took place a year later, was held in Rachel's hometown, about a 3-hour drive from the Spencers' hometown. Walter and Carly arrived about 3 days before the wedding, staying at a hotel in town with several other relatives, including Carly's mother, Blake's only surviving grandparent. Walter and his mother-in-law had never been close, but Walter tolerated her because she was Carly's mother. He was certain that she and her late husband knew who Carly's lover was, and his suspicions were reinforced by their occasional smirks in his direction. He never asked Carly who she told, and she never volunteered the information. Walter wasn't blind, and during the 2 days leading up to the ceremony, he had seen Carly and her mother whispering together several times, their heads close together. He assumed that Carly's ongoing strange behavior was somehow related to the whispering, but Carly denied that anything had changed when her husband asked her about it. It was a beautiful church ceremony. Carly's makeup had been smeared with tears from the moment the wedding march began. During the ceremony, she squeezed Walter's hand many times as they sat in the front row on the groom's side. "Look how handsome our son is," she whispered to him at one point. Walter and Carly walked arm in arm near the back of the church as they left after the ceremony, when Walter saw what he knew had been causing Carly's nervousness over the past few days. He was sitting alone, and although Walter had never seen this man before, he knew immediately who he was, as he looked like an older version of Blake. The man watched Blake and Rachel intently as they led the line to the reception, and didn't notice that Walter was watching him just as intently until he and Carly joined the line with Rachel's parents. The man never made it through the line of well-wishers, and Walter lost sight of him, only seeing him in a few photos when the cars began to line up to drive from the church to the reception at a nearby hotel. Walter didn't say a word to his wife about the man who drove up to the reception hall while she was happily chatting about the ceremony, repeating how handsome their son was and how beautiful their new daughter-in-law was. Walter knew that on this momentous day he should have been as happy as his wife, but that was obviously not going to happen, especially when he saw his son's older doppelganger sitting at a table in the reception hall. More photos were taken in the reception hall, and all the usual wedding activities took place, such as special dances, cake cutting, and speeches. An hour after the reception began, Walter was mingling with family and friends gathered in the lobby when he realized that his wife, son, and mother-in-law were missing. He sarcastically wondered to himself what the odds were that all three would be in their restrooms at the same time, and decided to check those odds as the knot in his stomach grew tighter. 4 heads turned in surprise when Walter entered the room, located just 2 doors down from the men's restroom. Carly and the unknown man looked agitated. Blake was clearly annoyed. "Why wasn't I invited to this private party?" Walter asked. "Glad you could make it, Dad," Blake said. "It seems Mom had a little wedding gift for me. Dad, meet the mysterious man formerly known only as my father, Aristotle Klesko. As I just found out, Mom sends my father information about my life every year, including photos. And since this is such a special day, she and Grandma decided that I should finally meet him." Now it was Walter's turn to be surprised. He had correctly guessed the identity of the mysterious man, but he had no idea that his wife had been keeping him informed about Blake's life, even though she had promised Walter that she would never contact this man again and that Blake would only meet him when he himself decided he wanted to. "So it wasn't your idea?" Walter asked his son. "Not in my life, Dad," Blake replied. "I could have lived my whole life without ever meeting my parent. I have a father. I don't need a pretender." Both Walter and Blake turned to Carly, who looked more than a little scared. "We had a deal, Carly. First, you cheated on me and got pregnant. Then you broke the second promise you made to me by telling that piece of shit about my son. My son, Carly. I'm the one who raised him, who loved him every minute of every day. What did his father give him other than getting his mother pregnant?" Tears streamed down Carly's face. She stumbled before finally responding. "Mom, and I We decided that Aristotle deserves to at least know about his son and be involved in his life, Carly said. I mean, legally, he could have claimed Blake as his own at any time and fought to visit him, so it was at least a way for him to stay close enough to ruin Blake's and our lives if he decided he wanted to, Walter interrupted. Hey, Aristotle spoke for the first time. Shut up! No one wants to hear a word from you, Blake growled. I never wanted to know you or anything about you. I don't care if you have other children. They mean nothing to me. A moment, a fart, nothing. Aristotle clenched his fists when he heard Blake's statement. Walter didn't miss it. Don't even think about it, Walter said quietly. After I beat the shit out of you, I'll talk to your wife, if you have one, and blow your world apart. How would you like to get divorced and pay child support for 18 years, which I could use to sue you for? I think that's a losing proposition for you. As for you, Walter said, turning to his wife, the first strike is cheating. The second strike is getting caught. This is your third strike. And as my favorite baseball umpires say, you're out of here. I can't believe you've broken my trust again. And from the looks of it, you didn't waste any time throwing my trust in the trash like you did all those years ago. I fell for the old, I love you so much, Walter line. I've been lied to for 25 years. Shit. It's over between us, baby. Have a nice life.